nature program for you with birds and reptiles that are native to Maryland. How many of you are from Maryland? And the rest of you are from out of state? What states are you from? Pennsylvania. Illinois. Okay, well, welcome. Patapsco Valley State Park is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. It started in June of 1907, so this is the centennial year, and we're very proud of that. And also, these state parks are really special places. I mean, we all enjoy them as places of recreation, to camp and all that stuff, but they're also refuges for animals, for natural habitats. Because what's happening is as urban sprawl goes out and new buildings are going up and houses and developments and things like that, it's taking the habitats of these animals away. And state parks are a sanctuary for these animals. And one thing I like to think about is that when we're in the state parks and we're enjoying ourselves, we're in the animals' homes. So it's like when you have guests at your house, you want them to respect where you live. We need to respect where the animals live. So for this next hour, we're going to be talking about these animals and what we can do to help them. And first question I need to ask everybody is, how many of you have pets at home? A lot of you have pets at home? Okay, well, the first thing we need to understand is what is the difference between a pet and a wild animal? Your pets at home, when they get hungry, who feeds them? Your pets at home. You all feed them, right? And when they're thirsty, you give them water. And when they get sick, you either take care of them or you take them to the vet. Well, wild animals, it's a little bit different. When a wild animal's hungry, who feeds it? It has to find its own food. And it has to find its own water. And if a wild animal gets hurt or gets sick, who takes care of it? Nobody. It has to take care of itself. And if it can't, it dies. So when you have a pet, you make a commitment, you have a responsibility that you're going to take care of that pet. Wild animals have to take care of themselves. Now what's happened in this case is we have a number of animals here that were at one time wild animals. But something happened to them and they're no longer able to take care of themselves. And they're not really pets, but they're not really wild animals anymore. They've become sort of what we would call an ambassador for their species. They're not living the life that they were intended to live, but they're living a life that helps us to understand about these animals. So the first one I'm going to get out tonight is the largest of the owls that we have here in the state of Maryland. Anybody know what kind of owl this is?
Horned owl.
Yeah, it's called a great horned owl. And it gets its name from these feather tufts here that look like horns. A lot of people think that they're the owl's ears, but they're not. They're not the ears. They're just really part of its natural camouflage. They're just feathers. So that raises the question that if these aren't its ears, does it have ears?
Yeah.
How many people think it has ears? How many think it doesn't have ears? Well, it does have ears, but their ears don't look like our ears. They don't have a flap on them like we can grab a hold of our ear. All they have is a hole in the side of their head with feathers in front of it. And if you notice, there's two dark lines on either side of its eyes. That's where the ears are. And their ears are asymmetric. It's high on one side and low on the other. And the reason for that is it helps them to triangulate the sound when they're sitting up in a tree searching for food. You also notice they have very, very large eyes. Their eyes are so big in proportion to their body that if our eyes were the same size in proportion to our body, our eyes would be the size of grapefruits. We would look something like this. And a lot of people think that owls are very smart. You hear this wise old owl. Well, it's not necessarily true because their eyes are so big, they take up a large portion of their head, so their brains are very small. So they're not really the smartest animals. Okay, they also have a very sharp beak. They use that beak to eat with. But where do they get their food? Anybody know? First of all, what do they eat? Can anybody guess what they might eat?
Mice. Small children.
Mice, yeah, they could eat small children, the ones that don't behave. But
only blonde-haired ones.
Other birds?
Some brown,
yeah, they can eat other birds. They can eat small mammals, and sometimes they've been known to eat larger mammals like skunks, rabbits. They've also all animals do that. Yeah. Sometimes they'll even take a small cat. You'll hear about people who put their cat out at night and it never comes home. They don't know what happened to it. Did it run away or whatever? Well, it's possible that it could be taken by a great horned owl. And when I say it, sometimes they eat skunks. You say, ooh, skunk, that's pretty stinky, you know, who could eat a skunk? But the thing is, they can't smell. So it doesn't make any difference to them whether it's a skunk or a rabbit, it's all the same. Okay, so how do they catch their food? Anybody know that?
Yeah, sure. They have fabulous triangular abilities by moving their head in which way, so they have the highest success rate of any bird for attacking other prey because they can triangulate so well with these eyes and their ears, and they can pinpoint the prey. Exactly. And they have deep, sharp talons which they instantly kill and hold the prey with.
Right, and they can hear, their hearing is so sharp that they can hear the heartbeat of a small mammal like a mouse down on the ground. So they hear it, and they can turn their heads and look in that direction. Now, you notice he turns his head around. They can turn their head 270 degrees, which is about 3/4 of the way around. It would be like if you started turning your head to the right, you could go past your right shoulder, around the back, and all the way to your left, and vice versa. So they can turn their heads. And the reason that they have to do that is because they can't move their eyeballs. You can hold your head perfectly still and move your eyes back and forth without moving your head. They can't do that. Their eyeballs are fixed in their head. So if they hear something over there, the only way they can see it is to turn and look in that direction. Okay, so that very sharp eyesight, which they claim, I don't know how they know this, but they claim that these guys can see so well that if there was a newspaper in the end zone in a football field, and they were on the goal post at the opposite end of the field, they could read that newspaper. Sure. I'm not sure about that, but that's pretty sharp vision. So, so they can fly down, and they're very, very quiet. They're called silent hunters. When they fly, there's no resistance against the wind of their feathers. Most birds, when they fly and you hear a bird fly by, there's like a flapping noise and their wings are hitting the air and it's making a noise. I'm going to get him to flap his wings and listen. You can hardly hear anything. So imagine this little mouse walking along on the forest floor, and this guy is swooping down. He doesn't even know he's coming. And by the time he realizes it, it's too late. Now he's got these very sharp talons, as you mentioned. He can go down there and he can grab the mouse, and he's got so much pressure in his grip. A strong man, take a guy like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, weightlifter and all that stuff, he's got 50 pounds per square inch of pressure in his hand. This guy has 250 pounds of pressure. So he can just grab that mouse, crush it, take it up in the tree, and eat it. Now when he gets up there, does he open a little drawer and get out a knife and fork and start eating? No. He uses that very sharp beak and those talons, and he pulls his food apart and he eats it. And he eats the whole thing. He eats the entire mouse, everything. And what happens about 8 hours after an owl eats? Not quite. Almost, that too, but something else.
He regurgitates food.
He coughs up a pellet. It's called an owl pellet. And we've got some here. These are not snacks. She passes these around for you to look at. Don't open the bag. So don't open the bag. It doesn't smell good, and you probably don't want to eat it. But anyway, you can look at that, and what happens is when they cough up that pellet, in the pellet are little bones and the things that they couldn't digest. And you can actually look at those and tell the kind of animals that they were eating. So when scientists find owl pellets in a forest and they start dissecting them, they get an idea of what lives in that forest. Question?
No, no question, but I just made a comment. When I was deer hunting one time, an owl came by toward dusk. They hunted at night mostly. And I never heard it coming or going, but it took the hat right off my head.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and found out it wasn't edible, dropped it, of course, I didn't. But their feathers, I don't know what they call it, where they're split on the ends. With fringe, which is how they are so silent. Yeah.
Right, and there's
Cool.
no wind resistance.
We're passing some of the feathers out now.
Yeah.
They're on this side, but they'll come by and you can
I got a quick question. This particular owl, is this a large horned owl or a small one?
This is the largest of the great horned owls that we have in Maryland, the species. This is a small male.
A small male.
Yeah,
okay.
and the females are about a third larger than the males. In most species, the male is larger, but with the great horned owl, the female is larger. So she's about a third larger. Now, this owl has a damaged wing. I don't know if you can tell, but what happens with a lot of these birds is they get hit by cars. And you say, well, how would an owl get hit by a car? Well, what happens is when people are out driving around in their cars and they're eating cookies or potato chips or even an apple, and they throw the trash out of their car window. And there's crumbs, there's cookie crumbs, potato chip crumbs, or apple core, whatever. It's food. That goes to the side of the road, and it attracts small rodents, rats, mice, whatever. That's what he eats. So he's sitting up in the tree looking for small rodents, and there's one on the other side of the road eating some trash that somebody threw out of their car window. He's focused on that. Remember now, he doesn't have peripheral vision like we do. He can't move his eyeballs. He's focused on that mouse on the other side of the road. So he goes for it. Now, one of two things is going to happen. A car is coming, and the car is either going to hit the owl, or the owl is going to hit the car. In either case, the owl's going to get hurt. In this case, he was hit by the car, damaged his wing. He can't fly the way he needs to fly to be able to hunt. So now he becomes part of the Scales and Tails program, and he's an educational bird. But if we were to release him back into the wild, he would die because he can't take care of himself anymore.
What kind of hoot do they make?
Just basically what you said, like
Are they
a hoot,
called
like
hoot
a
owl?
hoot. Yeah, they're the ones that you hear. Now, interestingly enough, he's at the top of the food chain. This owl preys on the smaller owls. So when you're out here in the park, you know, you might hear a screech owl, you might hear a barred owl. In fact, there are barred owls here. We heard one last night. As soon as you hear this owl, you won't hear the other ones anymore because they won't give their position away if they know he's around. So as soon as you hear him, forget about listening for the other ones. Okay. So any questions about him before I put him away? We've got some more owls to take a look at.
How do they taste?
No. So, but notice two things about this owl that were distinctive. He's got the feather tufts, the horns, and he's got those big yellow eyes. Now we're going to get another owl out, the barred owl.
Does he only eat live prey?
Yes, he's a hunter.
But not now anymore.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Oh,
You
no,
don't
not now.
don't give them
No,
live
no.
mice.
No.
Yeah, these guys, we feed them mice. We get 25-pound bags of frozen mice. So imagine going to your local grocery store and getting that.
Rat up that too?
Place that order.
And these great horned owls get about 3 mice a day. Sometimes a chick and 2 mice, depending. And in the summer, a little bit less than in the winter. In the winter, they get typically more seasonal in summer.
Okay, now this is the barred owl. And you notice those two distinctive features from that first owl aren't here. There's no tufts, and his eyes are black, no yellow, big yellow eye. Okay, so he gets his name, barred owl, from those stripes on his breast. They look like bars, so it's B-A-R-R-E-D, barred owl. There's also an owl called a barn owl, B-A-R-N, which looks completely different. It's brown with a white kind of monkey face, but this is the barred owl. And this one makes a sound that sounds something like, who cooks for you? Goes, you know, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? Something like that. And very distinctive sound. And we were camping over here and we heard one last night. So they are in the park. Most of what I said about the other owl holds true for this one. He's a silent flyer, sharp beak, sharp talons, silent hunter, all the same things. Turns his head 270 degrees. Has the ears just like the other one. Pretty much everything the same. Now, what's wrong with this owl? He's fully flighted, but he's blind. He hit the car instead of the car hitting him, and he's got head trauma.
Thank you.
Did you just hear one?
Yeah.
No, I heard a cell phone.
Yeah. No,
It's a barred owl?
she's got a barred owl call on her cell phone?
No, the cell phone made a
No.
noise.
Yeah, I heard one too.
It's right here.
Actually, the camera, my camera makes that noise. You guys hear the noise.
Well, it would be interesting if he hears it and would reply.
But very seldom.
Okay, so this owl is blind, and he has to be hand-fed. Now, owls, they use their hearing and their eyesight to find their food. So he can't see, and the food we feed him is dead. It doesn't make any noise. So if you just put the dead mice in his cage, he wouldn't find it. So you have to actually hand feed him. You hold it up to his beak, and he takes it from you.
Are owls migratory, or do they stay here all the time?
They pretty much stay
Sedentary.
here.
These kind of owls here are resident owls. There are some migratory owls or owls that sometimes migrate to different areas in the winter when there's a food shortage, like a snowy owl, but that's an owl from the north, from the Arctic regions, and we very seldom can we see him here, but that's like, I mean, if you're that lucky,
Yeah.
you're very lucky. It's not a common thing. They do migrate a little bit, but not that far south.
Now, would that owl attempt to hunt being blind? Would he still attempt to hunt being blind?
This particular one?
Yeah, if you threw live food, would he try to hunt it being blind? Would he still
Oh,
try to
well,
hunt?
that's hard to tell because we never really try that kind of stuff. It's we don't have live mice in the first place, and we wouldn't want to let them run around in the aviary and release them that way.
Yeah, he lives in a cage with two other barred owls. He's the male, and then there's two females, and both of the females are amputees. One has its left wing, one has its right wing, so we call one the Democrat and one the Republican. And they sort of look out for him. You know, they're like hanging out watching. But the funny thing is when the two of them sit next to each other, when you go in the cage, they tend to puff themselves out and hold their wing out to try to look big and scary. And when they're sitting next to each other just the right way, and they both puff up and they both put their wing out, it looks like a two-headed owl. That's quite funny. You want to grab the other one here? Okay, you've probably seen these two already, but we're going to just get them out and let you see the comparison. These are the eastern screech owls. These are the second smallest owls that we have in Maryland. And we happen to have one of each of the two colors here. This is the red morph phase, they call it. And these are full-grown owls. These are not babies. This is full-grown, and this is the gray morph phase. So they're the exact same species. They're just two different colors. Again, they have the feather tufts at the top, and they have the big yellow eyes, just like the gray horned owls. But these are little guys. And when you think of these owls being so small, compared to the other one. It's kind of like with dogs. You know, you have a German Shepherd and a Chihuahua. They're both dogs, but they're just different sizes. So we'll let you take a quick close-up look here.
About maybe a half an inch to an inch smaller than this one, and its name is the Saw-Whet owl. S-A-W-W-H-E-T, Saw-Whet. That's the second smallest in Maryland we're talking about. There's even smaller owls, like pygmy owls and flagulated owls. But they don't live in this area. They have a very sharp beak. It would really hurt.
The board out here, just looking at those tail feathers of those, is it? Then there are additions there.
I think they're pretty much all over the whole country.
Thank you.
They do.
He's got the horns. Okay, so that kind of does it for the owls. We showed you 3 different kinds of owls tonight. That's the
Probably don't like the flashes.
So we showed you 3 different kinds of owls tonight. It was the great horned owl, which is the largest, the barred owl, and then the eastern screech owl, which is the second smallest. Okay, now we're going to switch to a different kind of bird of prey. All those owls are called birds of prey because they prey on other live animals. But this next bird is something different. I heard somebody say what it is.
Peregrine falcon.
Yeah, it's peregrine falcon. This is the fastest animal in the world. You know, a lot of people think that the cheetah is the fastest animal, and it is the fastest land animal. But this is the fastest animal. It can fly up to 200 miles per hour when it's in a dive. Now this bird hunts other birds, and its favorite food is pigeons. And you hear about a lot of these birds living in cities, like living in downtown Baltimore. There was on the Legg Mason building downtown, there was a pair of them nesting up there. It's a perfect place for them. They're up on the building, they're high, they're out of the way, and there's a very plentiful supply of pigeons in the area. Now what happens is these guys will fly along and they'll see their prey and they'll go into a dive and they smash into it and they hit it full speed and kill it. And they're fast enough that they can circle around and grab it before it hits the ground.
So they hit both the other bird midair?
Yep.
The dive bomb smash
Dive
the
and
bird,
smack right
and
into
then
it.
circle around and catch it?
Catch it before it hits the ground. Yeah. Now, if you remember those other birds that we looked at, those owls that we looked at, they had colors like brown and white and black and camouflage that helped them to blend in with the trees. They can blend in with the bark and the branches and all that. So they can sit up on a branch and hide in plain sight. If you don't know they're there, you can look at them and you don't even see them. Now he's got completely different colors, but think about it. He's flying high in the sky, trying to camouflage himself from other birds. So something that's flying beneath him that looks up is going to see this white against the sky. And something that's flying above him, looking down, is going to see this dark back against the ground. So his camouflage is completely different, but very useful for his purpose. Now, he also is a mascot. You know what a mascot is? Here in Baltimore we have the Orioles. There's an Oriole bird that's the mascot. Okay, he's the mascot. Who knows from where? What has a falcon?
Atlanta.
Well, the Atlanta football team, but I'm thinking of a college. The Air Force Academy. Okay, the Air Force Academy, the Falcons, because his design here, if you look at him with his wings open, sort of looks like a jet plane, kind of the way the jet planes are designed. Now, we tend not to name these birds. Remember in the beginning I told you they were wild animals, and we try very hard not to give them names, because when you start calling animals names, they become more like pets. But sometimes you just can't help yourself. This guy came to us from a government breeding program. You probably heard that years ago there was something called DDT, and they were using it in agriculture, and it got into the systems of these birds, and it caused the eggshells. When the females laid the eggs, the shells were too thin, and the eggs broke, so babies weren't being born, so the species was dying off, and they got on the endangered species list. And that also happened to the bald eagle, and we were losing bald eagles. And just yesterday, the bald eagle was taken off of the endangered species list, which President Bush said is a very good thing to happen on the 4th of July. So we should all be happy about that. So anyway, this guy was in a government breeding program in Tennessee. And the program was so successful that when they ended the program, they were looking for places for these birds to go. And we got him. He came here. So he came here from Tennessee, and he's got these real long sideburns. So we kind of gave him a nickname. Anybody know what it might be? Yep. Elvis, yeah. So we affectionately call him Elvis, but officially his name is A3, which is the number on his band, on his leg. So yeah, he's a very special bird. He was also injured. I think he was hit by a car. You see his wing hangs down. He looks like he can fly pretty well, but he can only fly a little bit, not well enough to fly at 200 miles an hour and crash into his prey. So he eats mice just like the other guys. And any questions about him?
How high is this one?
Pretty high. I don't know the exact height. Do you know?
No, but we've seen them in the wild, not in the city, but at the cliffs in Shenandoah, and I don't know what the highest point in Shenandoah is, but they were right up there, and they soar pretty high from there even, so they kind of get caught in the currents also a little bit, and take advantage of the thermals when they're not getting hunting. Because that's more their natural habitat, of course. I mean, Larry was just explaining how they adapt very well to city life, and now they nest on ledges on apartment buildings or high office buildings, but their natural habitat is actually cliffs, so they're always high. And they don't build much of a nest, actually. They just kind of find relatively flat spots on a ledge or somewhere and just lay their eggs there.
Do they eat everything also?
Yes, they also do cough up those pellets.
Okay, so these owls and that peregrine falcon are what we call birds of prey, and they prey on other live birds. Now this next bird we're going to get out here is different. It's called a scavenger, and this bird is a very special one.
See you later, Larry.
Like air conditioning. Yeah. Okay, this is a black vulture. There's two kinds of vultures you see flying around. There's the turkey vulture, which has a red face, and this one with the black face. Now I said he's a scavenger. What that means is he's not out hunting live food. He's the one that's going around eating the things that are dead in the road, roadkill, dead squirrel, dead raccoon, dead groundhog, dead deer. You know, you might think of him as nature's sanitary engineer, going around taking care of the things that are out there. And remember I mentioned that the owl can eat a skunk because it can't smell. This bird can smell. So that's what what helps them to find their food. And you notice that he's kind of odd looking, that he doesn't have any feathers on his head. And the reason for that is because he eats dead things. And he oftentimes has to put his head inside of the thing that he's eating, so it keeps him from having to preen feathers, which he couldn't reach. So it's sort of a natural design. This guy has some interesting things about him. One thing is a defense mechanism that he has is he will throw up on someone. And he can shoot a projectile about 20 feet. So I think he could get the people there in the third row. Yeah. The other thing is, it's because he's eating dead things, which have a lot of bacteria and that kind of stuff. They have in their systems special enzymes and things which help them. And they tend to urinate on their legs to keep themselves clean. So that's another strange feature. But very interesting bird. He weighs about 5 or 6 pounds. He's kind of heavy. And you stand up here and hold him for a while, and it starts to get a little heavy. So if you want to see what that's like, go home and get a 5-pound bag of sugar and stand there and hold it for a while. You'll see it gets a little bit heavy.
I have a question about these things here. On the eastern shore, I've always been used to seeing the turkey vulture, which is the red-headed ones we call turkey vulture, and the regular black buzzard, which are feathered on the head. But until just the past couple of years, I've never really seen any of these black vultures over there. Are they common on the eastern shore and I'm just not paying attention, or is that something that they're moving in there now?
I think the turkey vultures are the most common.
Right.
The black ones they're not uncommon. They're around.
Right.
Sometimes you see both. I've seen these, driving up the highway. Sometimes you see these sitting on the light poles or whatever. So I've seen both in the area.
Yeah, but specifically about the eastern shore, we're not really familiar with that area, so I don't know if there's a change going on or if it's just you paying attention more to it now than you used to. That might be
Exactly right.
Well, I don't know.
Okay. So that's it for the birds. If there are any more questions about the birds, we're going to put.
Why am I sitting here?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Why is she sitting there? This bird. There's nothing wrong with this bird. The other ones were hit by cars and all that stuff, except that this one was raised by humans as a baby. Someone got it as a little baby chick and raised it. And what happens is it becomes imprinted on humans, which means that it is so used to humans, it never learned how to hunt for itself, it never learned how to take care of itself, so it depends on humans. And they're not afraid of people, which is a bad thing for animals out in the wild. That's why we should never feed animals in the wild, because they become dependent on people, they get used to people, they're not afraid of people, and they're not wild anymore. But this one was raised by a man. And for some reason, it knows the difference between a male and a female, and it goes crazy if a woman tries to handle it or get close to it. We take them to the state fair, and if one of our female volunteers tries to pick this bird up, it goes crazy. Now we also have a turkey vulture at the same place where these guys live, out in Owings Mills. It's just the opposite. It was raised by a woman, and men can't get near it. And we had one of our DNR guys last year at the state fair said, "Oh no, that's not true." He took it, picked it up, and it pecked him right in the eye. So you got to be careful with these. So she sits over here because if she was standing here, it would get a little bit upset. Okay, so I'm going to put him away, and then we have some reptiles that we're going to look at. I always have to back them into the cages, because if you put them in front ways and they put their wings out, they can't get in the carrier. Okay, the first reptile we're going to look at is something that you've all seen. In fact, we just saw one in the park today. We were out hiking one of the trails here and came across this guy. Not this one, but one later. Okay, this is eastern box turtle, and it's called a box turtle because it's the only turtle that can get completely inside of its shell and close up like it's in a box. It's not called a box turtle because it can box. It can turn its shell into a box. These guys have been around for 50 million years, going back to the days of the dinosaurs, and they're survivors. A lot of people find these guys in their backyards or in their neighborhoods, and they first thing is to put it in a box, try to make a pet out of it. Well, these guys can live to be 150 years old, or at least 100 years old. They can live a long time. And when you decide to make one of them a pet, you're making a long commitment. Okay? Because remember, while it's a wild animal, it's taking care of itself. You make it a pet, you're committing to take care of it. So you take this guy and you make it a pet, you're going to take care of it, and this is all it does. You see what it's doing right now? That's all it does. It doesn't play ball, it doesn't catch a frisbee, it doesn't go get your newspaper, it doesn't curl up on your lap and watch TV with you. This is all it does. So after a while, it gets a little bit boring. You have a lot to do to take care of a turtle like this. They hibernate in the winter, so you have to know how to do that. They eat salads, you have to make salads for them and all that. They need certain kinds of protein. So there are a lot of care and not a whole lot of exciting benefit. So the best thing you can do is, if you find one of these box turtles, is just let it be. Watch it, enjoy it, and just let it be. Because sometimes if you take one of these and you start to make it a pet, and then you decide you don't want it anymore, what people will do is say, well, let's drive it down to the park and let it go. Well, if you take it away from where you found it, they're very territorial. So they're going to start walking in circles looking for something familiar. And if they can't find food and they can't find water, then they're going to die. So you didn't really help it very much. Also, what people tend to do is they'll see one of these turtles and they'll say, I wonder if that's the one I saw last week. Well, they can get some nail polish and put their initials on it, or get some paint and put something on it so that the next time they see it, they can identify it. Well, you think that's a good idea?
No.
No, it's a bad idea, because first of all, there's toxins in whatever you would put on there, which would be harmful. And secondly, this is natural camouflage. We're always talking about camouflage for these animals. When this animal is down crawling in the grass and in the leaves and bushes, he's very hard to see. If he had big blue or red numbers painted on him, if he looked like your hat, he wouldn't be able to hide very well in that natural environment. So that's not a, what's that?
You can play right field.
Yeah, there you go. Have a hard time going after a line drive though. But anyway, not a good idea. So this one happens to be a male. He's got red eyes, bright red eyes, which we'll bring around and show you. And he's got an indentation on his underside. That's how you tell the males from the females. The females have are flat, they're flat on the bottom, and they have brown eyes. So this is a male. Now, yeah.
Are they getting scared?
I don't know. I've seen two in the last week and a half, so I don't know. We talk about their age. These guys have scales on their shells, and the scales have rings in them, and they can read those rings the kind of the way you would read rings in a tree, you know, the growth rings. So they can tell how old they are. I think this one is around 40 years old. We also have a baby here. This one is probably 3-4 years old. It takes 10 years for a baby to reach full grown status. And a lot of people think that these turtles can get out of their shells. You know, there's these movies out like Over the Hedge. Did you see Over the Hedge? Yeah. You know, the turtle gets out of his shell. He's walking around in green long underwear, and that can't happen in real life because these guys have what's called an exoskeleton. Our skeletons are on the inside of our body, our bones and everything. This backbone is his spine. So if he were to get out of his shell and run around, he would die. So if you're ever out on a trail hiking and you find an empty turtle shell, don't wait around because he's not coming back. He's gone. And there are some animals out there that could eat this guy, like a raccoon, for example. Raccoons are strong. They have hands. They can pry the shell open. So he does have predators. And of course, humans tend to eat these guys. Native Americans ate them, and they also used their shells for decorative things. They made rattles out of them. They sewed them on their pants and put stones in them so that when they danced, they made rattling noises. So they've had a lot of predators over time. Okay, so we're going to walk around here real quick and let you have a quick look at these guys. Look at his eyes, the red eyes and the indentation on the underside. He's got bright red eyes, and he's got this indentation. His red eyes. Okay. He's so used to people. I mean, the one we saw on the trail today, as soon as we got within a couple feet of him, this guy he goes through this program all the time.
Scooch over so we can look at him.
No. Dude.
I bet they have a lot of new animals.
They still stink. Look at that.
No.
So I backed off, and I drifted to the left.
Yeah.
And I looked, and I looked, and it was very good.
Well, I'll come around.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. It hasn't reached sexual maturity yet, so it's hard to tell right now. Right now it looks like it's going to be a male, female, but.
Pretty sharp. Excuse me. Are their feet pretty sharp?
The claws, yeah, I mean, you can feel it. I mean, he's not very strong yet, so, but if the other ones try to get away from you, they can really scratch you and break your skin.
Okay.
They don't have the wet feet though, because they live on land. I mean, they like to go in moist areas, but they're not really like terrapins that live in the water all the time. Yeah, it's not a snapper. Although the bite can be not quite as strong as I'll show you, can take a picture.
Female. Black eyes.
Then it's my turn.
Yep. Okay, we have one last reptile for you to look at, and starting to get dark. Yeah. Are any of those bags floating around out there with the feathers and?
You mean flying around?
Okay. And Hildy's going to get out the last of the reptiles we have for you to see.
We've been looking for it today.
They live around here?
Oh yeah. They're actually fairly common.
We can.
This is just.
We can hold it.
This is ordinary black rat snake. It's nothing very special that's common in the area. Although today we looked for it the whole day and didn't find any. But they are around. Sometimes you see them even in our yard. And this one is not quite as big as they can get. They can get to be like 5 to 6 feet long. I think this one is about 4 feet long. Anybody has seen those guys around? This, do you see them? No, they're not poisonous at all. They don't have the fangs like the ones that can inject poison. So they're really constrictors, and you can tell he's trying to wrap around my arm. So that's the way they kill their prey. They constrict them and then swallow it whole. So they can eat prey that's as big as they can open their mouth. As long as they can get around it, when they open their mouth, they can swallow it. But they don't chew it, they just kind of swallow it whole, and you actually see it go down the body as it digests. One time we had a funny story about one of those black rat snakes that had come in the apiary, and it got under the door in the cage of where the duck and the goose live. And it ate one of the eggs of the goose or the duck had laid, I don't remember, the duck. Well, then, of course, the egg didn't digest right away, and it couldn't get out anymore. It couldn't get back underneath the door. So it was kind of caught in the act. Do you see those snakes often in winter?
No.
No. And why is that?
They're sleeping.
They can be in your basement, that's right. Or they find any other place that's a good place to hibernate. They're cold-blooded animals, so they get their energy to move around from the sun, from the warmth of the sun. So when it's the cold winter period, they try to find a place where they can just shut down their metabolism and wait until the better weather comes. And starting in April, you can start seeing them around. And then again in October, November, they disappear again. I don't know if you can see it from that far, but he's been going around like this, sticking his tongue out the whole time. You know what they're doing when they...
Smelling.
It's actually smelling, yeah. They get a kind of a sample of the air around them, and then they bring it into the roof of their mouth where they have a special organ which allows them to smell with her.
He's smelling the air around him.
What else is typical for snakes? Something that
Skin shedding.
they shed their skin. Exactly. And it starts right at the head, and they kind of split out of their old skin, leaving the old skin, the scales behind, and that allows them to grow. In a minute, we're going to let people come over, not all together, of course, just in an orderly manner, and then you can feel them, and you'll be able to feel what the scales are like. A lot of people think a snake is slimy. You think that's true? You think a snake is slimy? Not really, huh? It's just smooth. And you have to be very careful when you touch a snake. You have to touch it from the head towards the tail, because otherwise you might damage the scales. If you go the other direction, it doesn't feel smooth, and it actually might damage the snake. So, do you know if this particular snake lays eggs or gives birth to live babies? Anybody knows?
No, I think you have live baby.
This one that lays eggs, actually, yeah. And a clutch can consist of between 6 and 25 eggs. In the aviary, we haven't had eggs from this one, but we did have eggs from a previous rat snake we had, and they were kind of oblong, kind of maybe 2 inches long, and not as round or oval as a chicken egg. It was really more long. So when the babies hatch, they're just tiny little rat snakes, and they don't look exactly the same as the adults. They might look slightly different or even totally different, maybe grayish or blotched, or you might not even recognize it as a rat snake in the beginning. Okay, any more questions about this guy?
What happened to him?
I'm not sure exactly what happened to this one, but most likely it was one of these cases where people had it as a pet and didn't choose not to take care of it anymore because they didn't have the time or they lost interest, and oftentimes then they bring it to the aviary where we do take care of them and where it can be used as educational animal.
Or sometimes they'll release, they'll take it to the park to release it, and a natural resources police, will see them and confiscate the snake or something like that. So we've gotten them various ways. And one of the main messages here is with these snakes is this is a totally harmless snake. And if you were out in your backyard and you saw one of these, you'd probably be a little bit frightened by it, but you shouldn't be. A lot of people, they go get a shovel and they kill it. And this guy will keep mice away from your house. It's a good thing to have around. So you shouldn't, jump to a conclusion right away that it's a poisonous snake and it's going to kill you or something. Just leave them be.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to pick them up when you see it. Just leave them alone if you're not comfortable with it. In fact, it's a good idea if you don't know what snake you're dealing with. It's always a good idea to leave them alone. Only people that really know how to identify snakes and know exactly which ones are harmful and which ones are not, leave it up to them to deal with them and take a close-up look. But otherwise, just let them be.
Chances are they're more afraid of you than you are of them.
Usually snakes won't attack for no reason. It's only when they feel threatened, just like with any wild animal, basically. Most snakes are not aggressive. I mean, there are some.
There's a similar snake to this. It's also black. It's a common black snake, which gets as big as this. We had one that lived in a garage on a farm we lived on. Lived in the garage for a good 6 years anyway. And we had it be named, and called him Sammy. And he kept the mice and the rats out of the corn. And we were told never mess with him. That was our instruction from our parents. Don't mess with a snake. And you go in the shop, and he'd be laying on the rafter just over your head and just look at you.
Just minding his own business, and as long as you leave him alone, he'll leave you alone as well. And that's the case with most wild animals.
I caught a snake, I think it was probably a close cousin to this one. It was a king rat snake. And they're rare apparently. And it has a triangular head. You would swear it was poisonous. It acts very aggressive. It goes up and strikes at you. It rattles its tail. You think, what kind of rattlesnake is this, And I was like, well, I didn't want to handle the thing. So I called up these people. They finally got me to the University of Maryland, the herpetary or whatever they call it, herpetology department. And they said what it was, and it was not poisonous. It was, but again, they said to leave it alone because it's a voracious appetite for mice and birds, and it was just right where I was working. We need to get rid of all the mice and birds.
Yeah, these are not really aggressive snakes, but some are
Yeah,
a little bit more aggressive
they
than
act
these.
aggressive.
Yeah, they act aggressive.
So what we're going to do then is anybody who wants to touch the snake, we need you to get in a line here, and then after you touch the snake, you can touch it with 2 fingers. After you touch the snake, I'm going to give you a shot of hand sanitizer because these reptiles can have salmonella. And for the rest of you, thanks a lot for coming tonight. We hope you enjoyed it, and have fun in the park. Thank you.
Good, Mike. Every week a little bit more progress.
Start from the head and you stroke down towards the tail. And then after you stroke it, but we can't touch the cage. We're going night-night. Cause it's at...
You ready to go for a hunt?
Sabrina, smile.